everybody. Welcome to another edition of Nasdaq Spotlight live at the Microsoft Ignite conference here in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Anna Gonzalez, and we're continuing our conversations today with Arun Ghosh, head of Blockchain US for KPMG, and JT Rose, product marketing Azure blockchain at Microsoft. So all you blockchain fans, get ready. Great conversation ahead. So Arun, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about KPMG and your role there.
Yeah, no, thanks Anna, thanks for having us. And thank you JT for being great partners. So I lead KPMG's blockchain work across our lines of businesses. So we're a big audit and tax consulting organization, and we also do consulting services. So across all three lines of businesses, what does blockchain mean to us? Why is blockchain becoming more important? Because at this core of blockchain is all about trust. So how do you take the concept of trust and bring it to our core businesses? And that's what I'm helping us define and having a lot of fun in the process.
That's always key. JT?
Sure. So about 3 years ago, Microsoft's customers started coming to us wanting to build with blockchain. And it's amazing technology. It was difficult to work with at the beginning. So we kind of focused on two things. One was just making it really easy to deploy the blockchain into your Azure subscription, building a cloud platform for this sort of next generation of shared applications. And now we're focused on helping customers build kind of this new class of applications where they can share both data and business logic across multiple companies that they may or may not trust. And so we recently introduced a tool called Azure Blockchain Workbench, which KPMG has been working closely with, and we're showcasing that in a number of customers here in Orlando this week.
And Arun, you asked a really good question. Why blockchain?
Yeah, why not blockchain?
Why not blockchain? Yeah.
So I think as we get in, about 18 months ago, if you asked me that question, I think a lot of folks would say, scratch their heads and say, isn't just a lot of hype, a lot of conversations about blockchain's the new world of cryptocurrency. And what we've seen, I think, in the last 18 months is the separation of crypto and the world of cryptocurrency from the core platform or technology of blockchain. And when you do that, and when our customers are doing that with the help of folks like Microsoft, we're seeing a major interest in saying, hey, can blockchain help me do my invoicing better? Can blockchain help me manage my supply chain better? Can blockchain help me understand my customers better? We were talking about the workforce of the future. There's a huge momentum in the marketplace today, whether it is life sciences, whether it is manufacturing, aerospace. All of these things I talked to you about is where blockchain is being thought about and even actively being deployed. So that's the conversation we're having, and right on sort of the 5 years ago, it was all about big data, right? Everybody's all about what is big data? It's this new panacea. How we're going to go about it? We're just, I think, the first phase of that with blockchain is moving beyond us, and we're seeing major adoption within the enterprise, and then across other broader public situations like Singapore Airlines. So KPMG went out and helped Singapore Airlines define how you would do loyalty payments with Microsoft blockchain as part of that technology foundation.
Yeah, I think we've worked with hundreds of customers on blockchain projects, and we started to see sort of a pattern emerge where largely it was multiple organizations interested in the movement of an asset. It could be a physical asset, it could be a digital asset like loyalty points, it could be a financial asset. But as that asset is moving across organizational boundaries, trust boundaries, with a requirement for audit. So I want to go back and understand the terms under which that thing moved, or perhaps dictate the terms under which it's allowed to move with a smart contract. Then blockchain becomes this really interesting shared sort of data structure to track and define the movement of that asset. So Singapore Airlines, I think, is a great example in the travel industry. Obviously, financial services was where sort of a lot of the interest outside of crypto generated early on. But that initial pattern has been kind of a guiding light for us with customers.
And are there specific projects that you're working on now that you can share with us that you're very excited about?
Absolutely. So perfect segue. So we're very happy and more than ecstatic that Microsoft actually asked us to work on a blockchain engagement at Microsoft. So Microsoft was our customer as well as our partner. So we essentially took a very opaque process from purchase orders, right? you put in an order management sort of system to procure a product, and then you send it out to your suppliers, and then you bring it all back and then pay them, right? So that procure to pay process, we were able to significantly save a lot of time for Microsoft by putting it on Microsoft blockchain. We're really happy about it in the sense that we achieved tangible business results, major productivity gains for Microsoft internally, because every bottom line dollar counts for everybody, right? And lastly, I think the exponential value of the use case is very clear to Microsoft, and let JT talk about your perspective.
Yeah, I think in building these initial consortiums, one of the most difficult things is getting your arms around governance of a utility that you're building with multiple other organizations, often that you don't trust. And so the advantage, I think, that we saw in bringing in KPMG was their expertise in sort of managing these complex multi-organization environments, and by offering ourselves as kind of the network anchor, we could learn a lot quicker. And so they've been super helpful in giving us a ton of feedback back into the product, and also accelerating, I think, the value of the utility for Microsoft and for the partners that we share the business process with. So we've been very grateful to have them on board for this.
It's fascinating. You guys have touched on different use cases and industries and some trends. So when you think about the clients you're working with, the space in general, there's so much room to run right now.
Absolutely.
So is there a particular area or use case that you're really excited about that's coming up in the future?
Why don't you start with Bueller and I'll jump on that?
Yeah, Satya's keynote yesterday, we had a company called Bueller on stage. They're actually out on the floor here. They have a 6-ton machine that processes grain. And so food safety is, to your point, a big area where we think blockchain can be super important. Bueller processes 65% of the grain that makes it into the world's finished food.
Wow.
So if you eat something that has grain or maize or corn in it, it's 6.5 chance out of 10 that it passed through a Bueller machine at some point. And with AI, they were able to sort of digitally transform these machines that they've been building for years with a software service that can guarantee that the grains passing through the machines do not have aflatoxins, which can be potentially hazardous. It's a pretty amazing process. And what they were looking to do was to say, can we extend that safety guarantee outside of the 4 walls of a Bueller processing plant and into the processes that we share with millers and granaries and food processors between Bueller and our shared sort of in-retail customers. And so that's something they've been working on with sort of a consortium of folks, a value chain for one in particular retailer. We've been working on that with them using Workbench. And they're on the floor today sharing it. But I think the idea of using blockchain to sort of immutably guarantee the safety of the world's food supply is a really sort of powerful ambition. And they have sort of a unique structural position in the market to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so doubling down on that use case, from a KPMG perspective, we look at 5 sort of principal networks of when products are made. So you have the source, where you sourced it from, the planning part of, what are you going to make and where are you going to make it. Then the making part, right? Now you have to actually execute production, whether it's grains, aircraft parts, computers, it's still the making process. And then the delivery part, which is the supply chain distribution. So across all these 5 networks, we see blockchain becoming very prevalent, right? And not just prevalent, it's becoming easy to adopt because of partners like Microsoft, right? If I haven't plugged Microsoft enough. It's true partners, right? They're one CP team, the engineering teams have been enormous support for KPMG. We wouldn't have had this platform today if it wasn't for their support. And so, apart from that vertical integration, we also see things like counterfeit products, things like asset management, things like depreciation, and the most interesting sort of traffic we're seeing and where we're completely busy on is customs and trade. So as grain moves, as product moves between geographic boundaries, with all these tariffs coming into effect, organizations, enterprise want to protect themselves and saying, how do we, with truth and trust, provide to the regulators, provide to the government some level of semblance of saying, you know what, our processes are clear because it's on blockchain. And that's what we're sort of focusing on. That's where a lot of our time and thinking is going.
This is so exciting. I want to shift gears just a little bit, and
Sure.
no pressure. These questions are light, but considering the answers you have just given me, I expect to hear something other than email for the answer to the first question. Are you guys ready for this?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, what app can you not live without?
For me, it's all of the rideshare apps, Uber, Lyft, and also Linebike. Linebike's, I'm a big fan of Linebike in Seattle. We have a bunch in our neighborhood. I use it to get to work a lot, so that's probably mine.
I'm going to go with Instagram.
Okay, good.
Right? Because it connects, different generations. Right? It's what my daughter uses every day, and I feel that demographic and that language is moving so fast. And obviously, I don't want to be the helicopter parent, but I think it's also a good way to connect seamlessly. Facebook is obviously the big platform, but Instagram is this short communication.
Right.
And I think there's so much going on over in the world. I think it's a good way to communicate, I think.
Considering what you all do, what would you say is the coolest piece of technology in your office?
Wow. We have a Service Hub 2, which is super cool. And I was telling Arun at dinner that I'm kind of an analog guy. I'm a whiteboard and ThinkPad guy. But whiteboard that we can use for meetings that is super cool. I love Service Hub.
Oh, I like that. The endless whiteboard.
It's great. It just keeps going.
Right.
And so from a KPMG perspective, we went out and built these ignition centers, right? We have one in New York, right, very close to where you are, where we host customers and clients. And what it is essentially a seamless customer experience. So we host everybody who comes in to talk about not just issues, but how do you adapt to them? So it's a room that is not just full of screens, but content in each screen. That's very issue driven. So you start with a day in the life and you end with what's going to happen in the next year.
Wow.
So it tells a story,
right,
but it's enabled by good, cool technology in my mind.
Yeah, and also it builds probably a shared vision, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So as we start to wrap up, usually I would ask your advice for the next generation, but I want to hear a little bit about blockchain is so new.
Yeah.
How did you get to where you are? And in that, maybe we could take some lessons on, for people who are interested in getting into the industry that you are all in, we could take some cues from you all to see how you got to the positions you're in now.
You've been in longer than me, so why don't you go first?
Blockchain,
I think our paths are actually pretty similar. You said it yesterday in the session. You raise your hand and say, you kind of take ownership of something, and then you own it. I was working in the Azure IoT business, and there seemed to be a lot of crossover with blockchain that we were looking to explore. And my engineering counterparts were starting to work in private preview with a number of customers. And so I was asked just to take a look at the work that they were doing and kind of put a go-to-market plan together. 3 months turned into 6 months, turned into a full-time gig, and I've been hooked ever since. It's an exciting place to be, and get to work with some great partners like KPMG.
It's a similar story. It's one of those things you raise your hand and you own it. And about 18 months ago, I raised my hand and I said, "What are we doing with blockchain?" And the firm asked me back, "What do you think we should do with blockchain?" And I'm like, "Okay, so here's a few things." And we were fortunate enough that we had our first major enterprise blockchain win with a big pharmaceutical company, and that's when it became real. And since then, I think we've accelerated the path to reality. What I mean by that is, when you take away the big hype around blockchain and make it very simple, very tangible. We've had now 6 engagements, one of them being at Microsoft, where we made the concept simple. And for me, as we grow the team and we grow the practice across audit, tax, and advisory, I think the big aha moment came with how closely all our work today is tied to what we're thinking about. So that's pretty much how I got into it. And
to your point about advice, though, I think nobody 18 months ago was an expert in blockchain. It's a new technology.
Right.
And so don't doubt your ability to get your hands dirty, roll up your sleeves, throw yourself into it. Everybody's learning this from the lens of their own historical perspective. We have people in our team that came from lots of different technologies, and it's a pretty big tent.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing insights from a personal level to an industry level. So I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thanks for
Thank you so
having
much for having us.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for more conversations coming right here from Microsoft Ignite.